My name is Alex Darnava. I am the CEO of Inhale H2. I'm sitting here with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Tyler LeBaron. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of InhaleH2 and I'm excited to share some information with you guys.
So for those of you who are unaware of who I am the primary inventor of the hydrogen water tablets. You've likely seen them. They're distributed by over 100 brands worldwide. So typically I've been behind the scenes in R&D. Now I have known Dr. LeBaron for going on 10 years now. Actually, when I started my journey researching in molecular hydrogen, Tyler was one of the first people I contacted. We've become friends over the years, and about 7.5 years ago, when I had questions about hydrogen inhalation, I couldn't answer yes to two important questions. Are the machines on the market safe and are they effective? I went to Dr. LeBaron as, in my opinion, the leading expert in the world on this subject, to make sure that I wasn't wrong and to get some pushback. And it's been a long journey, but we're here now.
Yeah, it is exciting, and I'm very passionate about molecular hydrogen. Many of you know that I've started back in 2009 learning about hydrogen. Back in 2013, I went to Japan at Nagoya University where I did an internship researching hydrogen gas. Then I started Molecular Hydrogen Institute in 2013, which is a science-based nonprofit where we're focused on advancing research, education, awareness of hydrogen as a medical gas. I've published a lot of articles and a lot of research. I'm very excited about this field. It's really neat for me. I'm really happy that hydrogen has advanced as much as it has, and we'll get into some of those benefits and what's going on in the research. But yes, I did my PhD also in molecular hydrogen. Well, it was in physiology, animal physiology, but we used molecular hydrogen. My dissertation was on cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, and we used hydrogen gas actually. And we would, in order to get hydrogen gas, we would actually use tanks of premixed gas, say exactly 2% hydrogen gas, so that we could ensure that it's therapeutic. We can ensure it's a precise concentration because we would get that specific concentration, right? And it would not be flammable. And that's the kind of way we would do a lot of the research. In fact, the earliest research published, they would basically administer hydrogen gas at say 1%, 2, 3, or 4% to the animals and then see which one is the most effective. And a lot of the ways that people inhale hydrogen gas today with a nasal cannula doesn't quite give you a targeted fraction of inspired hydrogen. We'll talk about that a little bit. But so when Alex came to me to ask, well, what about inhalation units? Because yeah, hydrogen water is great. I use the tablets and other ways. People get hydrogen water. What about inhalation? And he talks about his concern. Don't people have different ventilation patterns? How are you going to know exactly if they're getting enough hydrogen or what the flow rate should be and everything? And I appreciate that he had that concern as well as the potential flammability risk because again, in the laboratory, we can't have super high concentrations of hydrogen because it's a fire hazard. It's an explosion risk. So we talked a bit about the maybe some ways to circumvent some of the issues and to mimic how we provide hydrogen in the clinical research. And he asked me to, share with him my ideas and basically kind of consult on this project. And it took us quite a while, over 7 years actually. We'll get into some of the reasons why, but finally we've developed this machine. And I was just, as a kind of consulting thing, but I'm really excited about this product. And so this is the first time for 16 years that I have officially endorsed a product. It's something that I've helped to develop. We filed a patent on, and Alex has shown his sincerity in the research, supporting research, helping with clinical research, the trials, everything. So that really means a lot to me because the science and getting to the truth is the most important thing. And so I'm happy to be here and to have this position as the Chief Scientific Officer of the company.
I want to add to some of what you've said. Now, I believe we could have done this a lot faster than the 7.5 years it took us if others didn't think we were crazy in the early days. Every team we went to, every manufacturing partner we went to that was already involved in molecular hydrogen didn't think that our concerns were real concerns. And it was almost as if it was like a gaslighting effort, but I believe they actually believe this.
Yeah, that's a good point because We know that hydrogen gas is flammable above a 4% concentration and below a 75% concentration. So it's actually not flammable if it's above a 75% concentration. Like if you were in a room of pure hydrogen gas and you tried to light a match, nothing would happen because there's no oxygen. So this made it so that many manufacturers were thinking, okay, we can just supply pure hydrogen gas and there's no risk of flammability. Well, of course, you know that's not true because when you dilute the hydrogen gas, it immediately diffuses so quick, right? Hydrogen diffuses faster than any other molecule. As soon as it dilutes down, it gets into the flammability range. And so I remember we were trying to talk about having with our machine this reservoir bag, this inflatable bag that would store a 2 to 4% hydrogen gas concentration. And they're like, no, 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 we can't do that. That's flammable. I'm like, no, no, remember, hydrogen is not flammable below a 4% concentration. So a lot of people would like turn us down because they know that hydrogen gas is flammable, but they didn't understand what the science actually shows. And so it did take us a while. So that's one of the reasons that it was difficult to convince manufacturers that this is the way to go because they're just thinking we just provide hydrogen and they didn't really understand flow rates or other ways of how much hydrogen gas you're actually getting into your body.
And that's the exact point. We found that there was an early disconnect between the published research and what the manufacturers understood from the research. And they were pointing to us and looking at us like we were crazy, saying, no, we're delivering X milliliters of hydrogen gas that matches what these clinical trials do. And we're like, no, but that's at a constant flow rate through a nasal cannula. That's not how you breathe. And unfortunately, in manufacturing and marketing, often they don't have even the basic understanding of the science that they're building devices to deliver. So we dealt with these tremendous delays in finding teams that were willing to work with us. We were looked at like we were insane, but actually it's starting to feel that we've been really validated. We were just at the annual conference for hydrogen and biomedicine in Tokyo, Japan, this past November 2025. And Dr. LeBaron gave a phenomenal presentation about fraction of inspired H2 and why it's important. The most important presentation of the entire conference, in my opinion. But there were other professors who were relatively new to the field, that were not from the very beginning, early days of publishing, that also talked about the importance independently of fraction of inspired H2 and talked about this disconnect. And it's not that the early researchers, I believe, don't understand this. It's that they didn't think it was important to spell it out.
Yeah, because it's actually very obvious to the real scientist. And that's why I said in a lot of the research, you can give exactly 1% hydrogen gas to this animal cage, 2% to this animal cage, 3 or 4% to the other animal cages. And that way you can compare concentrations. And they weren't doing initially, of course, human trials. That happened later. And they did the human trials. Well, again, they would use actually tanks of premixed gas and they would administer, say, into the ventilator with a face mask. So again, you could target a specific concentration of hydrogen, which is termed, as Alex said, fraction of inspired hydrogen. And so a lot of times maybe manufacturers or companies would just read hydrogen inhalation does blah, 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 but not realizing that we need to ensure that the amount of hydrogen being administered into the body, into the lungs, is the targeted concentration. And so the focus became just on flow rate. What's the flow rate? And you'll see as we go through our discussion that flow rate is meaningless. It's all about the fraction of inspired hydrogen, FiH2, and that's how it's done with every medical gas. You talk to any clinician, any medical doctor, and ask them about oxygen inhalation, oxygen therapy, supplemental oxygen, and there's the term FiO2, fraction of inspired oxygen. That's how it is with every medical gas, and of course, or exhaled gases, fraction of expired gas. These are so well established and so well known that your primary researchers that publish these initial studies, they know that. That's like so obvious. And then later on, when we're starting to do more clinical research, we need to start looking at dose comparisons and other targets. We need to really specify the fraction of hydrogen gas being inspired. And you cannot know that simply by what is the flow rate, because you have things like your triangular breathing, you have your the nasal patency, for example, like when somebody's congested, what if they have a deviated septum? What if they're more mouth breathers instead of nose breathers? There's so many variables that in order to be a therapeutic for just a nasal cannula, you may need to have a flow rate from maybe only 100 milliliters per minute for one individual up to over 5 liters per minute, which is insane and very dangerous, as we'll talk about in terms of vulnerability risk. So that's why it's really important that we systemize the way of talking about the concentration of molecular hydrogen. And that was really my presentation, as Alex said, in Japan. And the publication is forthcoming on that. So it'll be really important, a major advancement in hydrogen research, so we can do more clinical research. And that's actually what made me really excited about this machine, so we could really advance the clinical research. So we don't have to use tanks of premixed gas, but really with this machine, we can deliver hydrogen gas the way we do it in animal studies and in the larger clinical studies, where we can provide precisely the concentration of hydrogen gas regardless of the size of the individual.
I want to speak a little bit to the philosophy of what we're trying to do here. Now, when I look at research on therapeutics and health, I see a dichotomy, right, with industry. Now, either there is the medical pharmaceutical side where industry drives the research completely and it is in a linear control, or we see the public research side where there is a complete disconnect between industry and research. And industry goes and does whatever they want with no real guidance from the research, as we've seen in a lot of the hydrogen and a lot of other areas. And I tend to think that what we need to drive towards truth and honest products and honest outcomes is more of a friendship between industry and research, where it's a collaboration where the researchers can guide truth and industry models what they're doing after the truth that is being found. That is something that I am trying to develop and lead the way in. And a lot of people also ask me what I think of as the future of hydrogen, and I know Dr. LeBaron might have different thoughts than myself, but I am starting to feel validated in what I have said with a groundbreaking publication that Dr. LeBaron and some colleagues just published in a very high impact factor journal just a couple weeks ago. But many say that if I truly believed in hydrogen, I would have launched it as a pharmaceutical. And to that, I tell them, well, then you don't understand the regulations surrounding pharmaceuticals and you don't understand the mechanism of how hydrogen works. Because at the end of the day, hydrogen is not behaving like a pharmaceutical drug. It doesn't fit the definition of a pharmaceutical drug. It is more like a lifestyle intervention in how it works. Now, that is not to say that it cannot be a medicine or a adjuvant therapy alongside medicines in the future. So we have pursued with the hydrogen tablets sort of this spirit that I mentioned of collaboration with academia. This is why we have a couple dozen clinical trials, 21 structure function claims to FTC and FDA standards, and we have more research underway than we have published. We're going to be doing the same with the inhalation device. But at the end of the day, both hydrogen water or hydrogen inhalation are a lifestyle intervention first. However, we know that other lifestyle interventions can improve outcomes alongside approved medical therapies and pharmaceutical therapies. That's something we're researching with the hydrogen tablets, delivering various approved pharmaceuticals with the hydrogen water. We're finding very strong results in rodents. And it's something we want to look into in hydrogen inhalation, in co-administration with approved medical interventions. We know that, say, if a patient is exercising and fit, they respond better to therapies. And again, molecular hydrogen as a lifestyle intervention poses the potential to help these other proven therapies.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and a couple of things that I think are very important to talk about is I love the fact that hydrogen gas, the research started, um, primarily 2007, but even before that, there was some articles. But the research has continued to grow, and the research is there, and then we developed a product based upon that research. And that's materially different, unfortunately, than maybe a lot of companies, industries. People have this wild idea, some concept, they put it together, start selling it, and then go look for the research to support it. And that's not really how science works. We need to first look at the data, we do the research and everything, and then try to develop a product that best aligns with how it's done in the research. And that's really how this machine was developed and why I feel comfortable being the scientific officer of this company and of this specific machine because it's the only machine I can comfortably endorse. That's because it's not flammable. That's because we know it's providing levels of hydrogen gas that we use in clinical research. I am not saying that other machines don't work. There are some remarkable benefits, even seen in studies. Of course, a lot of anecdotal testimonials, which, there's placebo and everything, but there are a lot of things happen with other machines. And there's no problem, apparently, right? They haven't exploded on them or something. But there's still that potential risk that maybe somebody else is not getting a therapeutic level, or maybe it is a flammability concern for somebody else. Actually, it's always a flammability concern. There's always that risk there. This is the only machine where you always know that you're getting a therapeutic concentration of hydrogen and there's no risk of flammability. And it's based upon the research. And that's why I feel comfortable putting my name behind this machine is again, it's based upon how we do it in the research. And it's the only machine that ensures that regardless of your ventilation patterns, you're getting a therapeutic concentration of hydrogen at the targeted concentration you want, and there's no risk of flammability. And as we continue looking at the research on hydrogen gas, as Alex mentioned, it is interesting. If hydrogen gas is so amazing and can do all these things, how come it's not FDA approved and how come we don't go down that route? And I think we need to temper our excitement by our ignorance in the fact that we actually don't know how clinically effective molecular hydrogen is. That's why we're doing the research. And if hydrogen really does have the ability to transform medical establishment and interventions, then the only way to know that is to do the research. And if we the only reason we're going to do the research is if we grow the awareness and is if we have good products like this where we can do that type of research and determine what's really there. And as we accumulate more evidence, then we'll know better the optimal method of administration in terms of the concentration, the duration, and all of these things. These are the questions we really want to answer. So I think the future of hydrogen is really bright, especially after this groundbreaking publication that we were able to publish showing a target of molecular hydrogen within the mitochondria, coupled with the number of clinical studies that are growing, getting more government funding to do hydrogen gas research, and knowing that hydrogen has such a high safety profile, which is really what excites me. I mean, we know, and we'll talk about, people with a healthy microbiome who have a healthy diet tend to produce more hydrogen gas than those who don't. So we're not dealing with some crazy foreign exotic gas that has never seen the cells. It's really quite natural to our bodies. And because the safety profile is very high, and because the research is very promising, we want more research. And how do we get more research unless we have good products, good awareness? And this is the ultimate goal, so that I would say by the year 2027, we're going to see some further groundbreaking studies and really get a lot of attraction. It'll be another inflection point in the awareness and research of hydrogen gas. And by 2037, it wouldn't surprise me if pretty much everybody has heard of hydrogen therapy in one way or the other. Maybe we still, of course, we'll still have a lot of questions that remain to be answered, but everybody's going to hear about it. That's my prediction.
And on a final closing note on this, for one reason that both Dr. LeBaron and myself in some ways are more confident than the average person, even the average person in science, and in other ways less confident to give advice, is what we know and we know what we don't know, but also our knowledge base is often several years ahead of what is in the public domain because we are involved in the research. We are seeing results that are coming out a long time before others are able to lay eyes on them.
Yeah, it's really excited to be part of this. I think the future of research and industry as working in collaboration, I think it's really the way things should be. It should not be against each other, polarizing, but it should be working in conjunction where the industry follows what the researchers and the research is saying, and the research helps the industry grow. And that's how it's kind of works in the pharmaceutical industry, but there's a lot of corruption. There's corruption on all sides of things, right? But ideally, that's how it should be, and that's what we're going to do with this company.